the League of Women Voters White Bear Lake area virtual forum for candidates running for Birchwood Mayor. This forum is not open to the public and is not being live streamed. It is being recorded and we will post it on our YouTube channel. In addition, local cable stations will replay the forum on a schedule determined by them. Candidates, if for some reason your internet connection is lost, please call in using your phone. I'm Mary Santee. I live outside the city in White Bear Township. I'll be moderating. League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that encourages citizens to participate in government. While the League studies and takes stands on issues, we do not support or oppose any candidate or political party. The goal of our forums is for voters to learn more about the positions of candidates who will be on the ballot November 3rd. Both candidates were invited to participate and both are with us tonight, and they are McKenzie and Mary Wingfield. Candidates will have a minute to make an opening statement in alphabetical order, and after that, the beginning speaker will rotate each question, and closing statements will be in reverse alphabetical order. A timer will show a card when you have 15 seconds, and then end. You may finish your sentence. So, McKenzie, you may begin your opening statement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the White Bear Lake League of Women's Voters for having this forum. And please allow me to state my reasons why I'm running for mayor of Birchwood. Birchwood's a great community. It has a long tradition of civic pride, and my wife and I have enjoyed raising our family here since 1994. I can think of nowhere else I'd rather live, and I'm running to try and help make Birchwood even a little bit better. Some of my positions. I believe in face-to-face personal communication, that residents should always be treated with respect and kindness, and that the council's proper charge is to serve the community based on community input. I believe that most, if not all, resident issues can be settled through open, honest communication with a win-win result. I feel strongly that treating people with respect and addressing issues with a standard process that's the same regardless of who the people behind the issue are will demonstrate that they were taken seriously, treated professionally, and will ultimately leave them satisfied with the decision, even if they don't particularly like the result. I believe in fiscal and budgetary discipline and planning. That means spending money wisely, smartly, hiring professionals when needed, asking the right questions up front, and budgeting for known and unknown expenditures. Money well spent saves money in the long run. Maintenance is always cheaper than replacements, and the cheapest bid isn't always the cheapest long-range price. I do not claim to have all the answers, and I also do not expect Mary have had all the answers in her past. I will bring volunteer.
Thank you, Michael.
I'm sorry.
You can see the timer?
Yes, I can see it.
The screen?
I was a little distracted by, I don't know what the noise in the background
I'm sure it happens. Mary Wingfield, you have an opening statement.
I do. Thank you for inviting both of us to this forum. It's a great opportunity for the community, and I'm glad that the League of Women Voters supports this kind of opportunity. I am running for re-election because of building on what we've done in the past and continuing on with those programs. I think Mike hit it on the head with the things that we've done, being fiscally responsible, making informed decisions, and taking good care of the infrastructure of our community and taking good care of the residents' concerns. We've got two things that are coming up for 2020 and beyond, I think very important. City Hall is an ancient building, about 70 years old, 70, 80 years old. Definitely, we're already working on taking historical significance of that and seeing if we can get funding for rehab. The other is a development pending on Cedar Avenue that anticipating can cause really a lot of havoc to the residents with regard to water issues. It's on a hill, everybody's downhill from that development. it'll have a great impact on our community if we don't do it right. I was the one who called for a moratorium so that we can review our code to make sure everything's in order, that it is a development that we want to achieve. And I'm proud of that, because it takes someone to know what the issues are in order to go forward using the best judgment. I think that's the path we're on. I anticipate we'll continue to do that to make sure we protect the residents' concerns and treat everyone fairly on that. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
And for the first question, we'll have Mary Wingfield go first. And the question is, what has your involvement been in Birchwood government and or volunteer activities?
How many minutes do I get? That's a long one. I've been involved with being mayor since 2009. I took 2 years off since then, but I've been continuously mayor since 2013. Every place in Birchwood, I can tell you, I participated, hands-on experience. We just put a new path in that we helped build. I was out there along with our city worker, put a new bridge in, City Hall, new garden, barn quilts at City Hall, putting the dock in at K Beach, building down at the hockey rink, helping trim the trees and clearing out brush there. Same with down at Wildwood Park. Basically hands-on, picking up litter. And also the thing I'm most proud of is we had a sewer lift station that was a problem for us over at the west end of town. It's a $500,000 rebuild. And our clerk told us about it. And I said, you know what, we've got no business building a new lift station when there's one just about a quarter mile away that's in White Bear Township. We worked cooperatively with White Bear Township and the county and got our sewer to go gravity. So there is never a cost going forward for that process. $500,000 we took off the books for that forever. Why? Because it takes knowledge of what's there and experience to know what we can do and make it work. And that's something that you just can't step into to do. You have to know what's there with your experience.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie. Anyone to, did you answer, Michael?
Am I allowed rebuttal time at this point?
Yes, that's, you each may have rebuttal.
Okay, I would just say that I've known Mary for the 26 years that I've lived here, and she is a tireless worker. Nobody's ever going to take that away from her. I would question the budget process. Since 2017, our city taxes have gone up over 62%. So saving us $500,000 is great, but it looks like we're going into major budget increases anyhow.
Mary Wingfield, anything to add?
Absolutely. Our budget was $400,000 when I started in 2009. It's now $500,000. We are recouping the cost of rebuilding that gravity line that I just spoke about. That is a one and done. When we recoup that in 2 more years, that $100,000 comes off the books. We told the residents that that was something that we would rather pay for out of our reserves than go out and get a bond, which would cost us $25,000 off the top, so that we would recoup that money on a tax basis and then revert back to our sub $400,000 that we were at before. So this is no way a tax increase. This is just covering our costs without going into debt.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question. And the first to speak will be Michael McKenzie. What makes your specific set of leadership skills and style a good match for sustaining and strengthening Birchwood?
Well, a couple things. Certainly Mary has more experience than I do running Birchwood because she's been doing it for quite a while. But my particular strength is organizational leadership and ethical leadership. And we need to improve the quality of civil leadership in Birchwood. We can't have council members calling residents bad neighbors in public meetings. We can't have council members using profanity in emails, in official emails. We can't have council members questioning residents' motives in public meetings. We can't have libelous letters by council members sent to the White Bear Press. We can't have libelous campaign signs put up about other people running for council. These are all things that have happened with this sitting council, and those are all things that will not happen under my leadership.
Thank you. Mary Wingfield.
So do I answer the question or do I get rebuttal?
You can answer the question and have a rebuttal.
Both or included? Both. All right. So let me tell you about the leadership. The neat thing about Birchwood is that we have opportunities that we've been able to share with other communities. I partook in leadership forum, leadership program through the White Bear Foundation, which is a wonderful opportunity. On that basis, I was able to recruit Jesse Akery, who was, then came on our council as well. The beauty of what that program allows us is that we know how to work a consensus, and we've been able to accomplish consensus building on virtually every vote, not because we agree with everyone, but because we understand what people's issues are and try and figure out how we can meet those needs and still come to a middle ground. We've been very successful at that. I can only recall one other vote where we had someone who just couldn't adopt the theories that we were going for, but that's fine. People are allowed to do that. So it's really important to keep an even keel. I think we've done that very well in our meetings. The things that Mike has alluded to are things that I don't have control over. I think it's good to set a tone. I think I've set that tone. I'm not disparaging. I don't challenge people. I think it's important to hold people accountable for what they do. Who are those people that you're alluding to? And so I understand your frustration maybe with some people. I know you've voiced your concern about that in the past, and you've taken issue to lodge complaints, and they've been addressed. So we can only do what we can do by example. I can't control what other people say. I think we've done a good job on that.
Okay, so you can each have a rebuttal to that if you'd like.
Well, Mary, when I complained about having council members use profanity repeatedly at me, I emailed you, and your response was, I don't have any information on this issue for you. And as far as the civility goes, I don't believe that putting up a sign calling me feckless is a very civil way to run a campaign.
So, Mike,
and we will stay away from personal attacks.
Yeah, not appropriate. Didn't do it. Don't know what you're talking about. But I tell you what, I like to do things that are a little different because I think it's a small town. We are allowed to do that. I didn't call you feckless. I have ditties in my head that have been circulating for 5 years. So I don't know, don't take anything personally. I'm just saying I'm not feckless. I didn't say anybody else was. I've got more ditties too if you want to hear them. But I'm sorry that you took it as personal. It wasn't. It's all in good fun. And actually that sign went down in the rain last night, so you need not worry.
All right, a new question, and it'll begin with Mary Wingfield. What issues in the past 2 years have you felt most strongly about, and how will you advocate for those issues if elected or re-elected mayor?
Okay, I need you to repeat the question. I thought you said issues in the last 2 years, but how will I do it going forward?
Yes, what issues have you felt most strongly about, and how will you carry forward on those issues, assuming they are not complete?
It's an interesting question. I'm really proud of the way that we've been able to work as a unit. I include the city administrator with that. Unfortunately, he has been burned out by COVID. That's one of the tragedies of having all the stressors that have been brought upon us. And that is an issue that going forward matters a lot. We've been able to take off a lot off the clerk's or the administrator's hands to make any transition easier for the next person up, including removing the elections process, not the elections itself, but the administration of that. We've now just offshored that to Washington County. We've also offshored the water billing so that doesn't have to be done in-house, and there's no transition problem since St. Anthony Village continues to share that workload with us. So going forward, we do have a new clerk coming on board the end of this month. We'll actually be hiring tomorrow. that's a big job. It takes someone to help that person with institutional knowledge. The number of years that we've been doing this, it puts a lot more obligation on our part to all pitch in. So I'm looking forward to that, but I also know that that's a lot of work, and we need a bit of patience with the community, because the person is not going to have full knowledge of our community right off the bat. But it really matters who's going to be the mayor, because that person is going to be looking to us for a lot of resources. I think I can provide that.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned in the past couple of years of some of the unnecessary spending. For example, we just recently took core samples of basically a bog to see if we could pour cement on it. And any construction person would have told you off the top of their head, you can't pour concrete on an area that's not even dry enough to mold for months at a time. Another example, we spent thousands of dollars in the past year surveying our parks, I guess to make sure that fences weren't 6 inches onto the land that were built 40 years ago. We've saved some money going with Washington County Sheriff, but I don't think our service is anywhere near as quality as White Bear Police did, so I'd like to revisit that. And then last, our plowing service, again, we've saved some money on that, but they're plowing our city streets with basically half-ton pickups, which just isn't a quality enough material to get down to the street and push the snow off the roads. Yeah, I guess that's enough for now.
Anything further from either of you?
Yeah, you know, Mike had brought up the issue of taxes, and all these things cost a lot of money if you want more plowing. Actually, we got the best kudos there was last year by a number of people. We solicit information from residents at every meeting. How's the plowing? What more do we need to do? And everybody had come in and said, yeah, they're doing a good job. With regard to surveying, yeah, we did surveying at beaches. In fact, we found we had 12 more feet of front footage on the lake at $10,000 a foot. That's $120,000 we were able to recoup in space that we needed, which I think is really important since COVID has made the beach highly desirable.
Michael McKenzie, anything further?
No.
Okay, we'll go to the next question, and Michael McKenzie, you will go first. What is your view on new construction, improvement, and development in the city of Birchwood?
Thank you for this question. It's an important question. I think it's one of the main things that I feel frustration with Birchwood. We have to have smart growth and smart stock renewal in the city. And right now we don't seem to have that. I have a friend who is owns a roofing company, and he tells me it's really challenging to work with Birchwood. They're harder than any city around. When I cut down some trees this last year, I warned the man that Birchwood could be a challenge to work with, and he just laughed. He goes, "Oh, I'm well aware of working with Birchwood." Just a meeting or two ago, we had a man that wanted to rebuild his garage, and his plan improved the it improved the nonconformity on the side setback, improved the nonconformity on the street setback, and did not increase the square footage of the building substantially. And yet we said no to that. That garage would have been aesthetically a lot more pleasing, and frankly would have increased the property value for the tax base. And I just don't see any logic in that. It doesn't follow having a variance code that we don't use to proactively improve the housing stock in the city.
Thank you. Mary Wingfield.
Well, I have no problem imposing any code the city wants us to impose. We're just given the charge to follow the rules. And I think we've done that uniformly. When people come in and they build we have all sorts of weird lots. When they come in and they build according to code, they don't ask for variances. It's really hard then when someone comes in with a big lot and wants to violate the code and not conform to variances when we have other people who do it to a T. So we're just imposing those code provisions that have been around for a long time. I'm always open to considering other codes if people want to do that. But it's just a matter of fairness, is that, you know, if you don't like the code, let's change it. Just tell us that. But then don't ask us to impose the code that's on place and blame us for that, because that's our charge.
Well, I would say in this particular case, two of the council members didn't know the difference between a variance request and a prevailing setback decision. And when this man was going to build, basically over $1 million house with the property price included, and for him to approach the council and not be given the respect that the council members did their homework and didn't even know the difference between a variance and a prevailing setback decision, that's an embarrassment on the city.
Mary,
so I'm responsible for a council member. Mike, I try and set the table about what the issues are. I think the clerk does a very good job in the packet of explaining it. But when somebody says something, we try and get them back on track, but that's all you can do. I mean, that's, if they're missing the track, we bring them back along. But I don't know how that becomes something that you can resolve as mayor. Maybe I'm missing something.
Thank you. Kind of continuing in that same vein, and to make your positions clear, Michael McKenzie first. How would you put yourself on a spectrum in improving on a request for a variance? Would you tend to be strict or flexible, and anywhere in between?
Okay, well, first of all, I do agree with Mary that the codes need revising. They need a good look at. We should have a community committee that takes a periodic look at every code that we have to make sure it's still up with modern times and our demographics, which is one of the reasons we're having the trouble with the subdivision. We hadn't looked at that in years, and we're caught off guard, and now we're kind of behind the 8 ball on that. I would say that I think we should be flexible with the variance. I think we should encourage building and improving the housing stock in Birchwood. I think we can very often find a win-win situation. Certainly people will ask for things that we can't approve from time to time. I don't think that wouldn't be surprising, but I think we have to do a better job of meeting people halfway and trying to fix these. Mary mentioned it, but I don't think she emphasized it enough. The vast majority of lots in Birchwood are non-conforming right now. And so it's not a question of how many houses are conforming. We know the vast majority of them are non-conforming. So we have to navigate this in a way that becomes good for the people trying to move in and develop houses, and good for the city helping their tax base, and frankly improves our reputation with the local builders.
Thank you. Mary Wingfield.
You know, I want to treat everyone fairly and equally. So if the process is one in which somebody's coming in and can conform, but says, I want to do it this way, but I don't want to conform that way. If other people are conforming, we follow that. We've been very, I believe, generous in certain matters in terms of impervious surface, which is something that we found ways to mitigate the runoff and allow people to make more of their lot than they otherwise would. We've found ways, if there's precedent, we give people precedent. I follow that, because I think it's very unfair when somebody comes in and they find out later, hey, somebody else got this, but we didn't. That to me is not what Birchwood's about. Everybody needs to be given the same opportunities and the same benefits. So I think, you know, just the bottom line is I do follow the advice of our attorney. The attorney has said variances are the exception, not the rule. If the variances start becoming the rule, then you need to change the rules. I don't mind doing that, but we need some people to step up and do that. We haven't had anybody. It's something that our clerk can't do, but it's always something we can look into. But it's got to be a community effort, and there's got to be a groundswell for that. I'm not sure I see it, but if Mike wants to become part of that process and help out, I'd be glad to have him help.
Well, Mary, starting from a blank slate and asking for a variance is one thing. Having a current existing structure and improving the nonconformity in 2 different ways while rebuilding the structure, that's a whole different animal. I mean, those are the types of things that I'm talking about. If they start with a clean slate, to have them come close or perfect to following the code is one thing, but we have to have more flexibility with improving nonconformity.
So Mary, follow up?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
All right, along the same lines, and the first to answer is Michael McKenzie. What is important when designing the new development ordinance for Birchwood?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are important. First of all, whatever they design has to fit in with the community. I mean, we're not going to put, 3-story structures there. We're not going to put apartment buildings there. That type of thing we certainly would want to avoid. We have to make sure that whatever they put in there follows what we just talked about, follows city code. Not only the building structures, but the runoff issues and the road access issues. We have codes on that. Hopefully they're modern enough that we can live with them because we have someone that's here trying to develop. There's some question about the runoff. That seems to be a big question for a lot of people, but building a proper development, you can always deal with runoff. When you're starting from scratch on something like that, that won't be an issue as long as we stay on top of it right from the start.
Mary Wingfield.
That's interesting. Runoff is the issue, and runoff can come up and bite you in the butt when you least suspect it. And you can't do anything about it but eat the dollar bills that it costs. And that's what I want to watch out for. You can say this development should be done accordingly to our codes. That doesn't guarantee anything, because our codes basically say you have to have a certain size lot and a certain size setback and a certain size building. That doesn't guarantee you any protection of the people who showed up at a meeting a month ago saying, what's the plan? What's going to happen to our property? What's going to happen with the runoff? Every one of those persons showed up and they were concerned about what it was going to do to their property values. This is a huge issue. And to just assume our codes are in place, that's the whole reason why I asked for the moratorium. We haven't had any development in 40 years. It's not something we looked into. But we need to make damn sure that nothing comes back to bite us that we could have prevented now. And I took the foresight to say we have to do it now rather than just hope that it's going to work out. That's what leadership is. That's what planning is. I have no problem doing that. And I think we're going to do a good job. But to say that runoff is not a problem, that is a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, I would say that leadership is revisiting codes on a schedule so that they don't get 20 or 30 years out of date. And as far as the runoff is concerned, people hate a vacuum of information. And right now there's no plat design. They don't have a design to look at. So there's no way to tell what the runoff problem possibly could be. Once they get a design in place, then we can take a look at it. But until then, it's all just hyperbole and worry.
Any more, Mary?
I'll tell you what, I have a degree in landscape architecture. You don't just say, well, wait till the plan shows up. This development is on top of the hill. It's on sand. All that water will go into the ground, into the water table, and it will either show up downstream in a pond, which will flood someone's backyard on East County line, or it will go downstream into the water table and flood the people who are on Oak Ridge who are already pumping their sumps 24/7. They already know there's a problem. I'm just telling you it's going to get worse if we don't take care of it, and we don't need to wait for that to happen. It will happen.
All right, next topic, budget. And Mary Wingfield will begin. The Birchwood budget has had a 60% increase from 2017 to 2021. What suggestions would you have for where savings might be found going forward?
This gets back to the previous answer I gave. We can go back and revisit this with the public, but we put in a $300,000 project down on South Shore Boulevard to take out a lift station, one-time expense. We could have bonded for that and spent a lot of money with the bonding company and gone into debt. We chose to spend down our savings and recover it over time. So that is a public improvement tax consequence that is no different than another city going out and going into debt for. So we could have put it on the books for 20 years at a very small increment, but that was very expensive to us. So we chose the latter. So when you look at what our actual operating expenses are, I think they're going up about 4% for this year, which is below the county. I think it's definitely below Mahtomedi. We're right on par with other communities, except White Bear is pretty hard to beat because they have businesses. That's the only thing we don't have that we can't tap into for extra revenue. But I was just talking with my neighbors yesterday, and they were comparing notes with Mahtomedi residents. They said they'd love to live in Birchwood. We take good care of our roads. We don't have any, our taxes are significantly lower than other communities. and we're well run. Actually, somebody just told me that tonight too when they were biking through. They said our roads were much better than other communities because we actually spend the money on maintenance and proactive repairs rather than having to do capital rebuilds, which are really expensive.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie.
Well, Mary, I understand you want to point to one big expenditure, but the budget in 2017 was 327,000, and in 2021 it's going to be 530,000. So that's more than a one-shot deal. I would also say that money is cheaper now to borrow than it's virtually ever been, and borrowing money for an improvement like that and paying for it over time is actually more fair to the citizens. To have the citizens living here today pay for a 10 or a 15 or a 20-year project in the next 2 years isn't as fair as having the citizens in the future pay for the project as they're using it.
Two things that we could have done on that. We could have recouped the money a little bit slower, and we talked about that. The council chose to go over the 4-year recovery of the monies that we had spent. But Mike, I don't know where you're getting your numbers from. We just had a budget meeting and we're going up to 500,000 for this year, not 530. And 327, we haven't been down to 327 since way earlier. But I tell you what, the budget was 400,000 when I took over in 2009 and became mayor. So now we're up to 500,000, but 100,000 recoups the monies that we spent for the capital project. If you want to spend money on a capital project, it's $25,000 for a bond just to spend the overhead to get a bond, because we have to borrow a bond.
Michael McKenzie, anything to add further?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. The first to answer will be Mary Wingfield. How would you increase opportunities for public participation in city decision-making?
We've gone to a task force approach. When we have issues and people are interested in helping, we solicit them. So we've got one for Wildwood Avenue for taking care of speed bumps or a speed zone area. We've got another one, think about that one. We do that with parks from time to time. And so we found that it works best so that people don't get sidetracked on other issues. Like, here's what we need help with. We did that with water meters. We need to help with the transition in water over to new water meters because ours are functionally obsolete. And so it's nice to give people a task, let them accomplish it, come back and say, do you want to help us again? And that's worked out well for us this way. So we've always been soliciting people for help, volunteering, put it in the newsletter every quarter. I always ask for volunteer participation. People don't have as much time. We always recognize the people who are volunteers in our newsletter because it's so important. But we have a very limited number of people who do that. People who are usually my go-to people, very helpful, retired, always want to give back to the community. But it's a very limited amount with people with family and kids. But we're always looking for more. People want to help. All they need to do is contact me and we'll always give them something to help out on.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie.
Yeah, I agree with Mary that there's no shortage of people in Birchwood that are willing to volunteer. The problem is they volunteer, they get on a committee, and then the city council ignores their decisions or their suggestions. That happens repeatedly with the building committee. The Parks Committee got together and wrote a very nice formal presentation, and I don't think a good chunk of it has been followed. The other issue with volunteers is you have to be smart on when to utilize them. Sometimes volunteers are great, and sometimes volunteers know just enough to be dangerous. And I don't mean that in a negative towards the volunteers, because they're doing it for free and they're doing the best they can. But a good example of that is the hockey rink last year. We had volunteers flood the rink, and clearly they didn't know the basics of rink flooding. Any hockey player could have told them, you don't flood over 10, 12 inches of snow. And that basically lost us a season on the hockey rink because it was almost impossible to get back once you get slush like that frozen in. So it's great that we have volunteers in Birchwood, and they're needed and they should be respected, but there's a time not to use volunteers too.
Anything further?
Sure, Mike, you got it wrong on the hockey rink. It was an employee who did that. He was in training. We should have overseen it more. But, you can't blame volunteers because it was something that it didn't ruin the hockey rink season. It ruined a month. And we all sucked up and said, that sucks. That's not a good thing. And we're not going to let it happen again. But it wasn't a volunteer. We need to use our volunteers when they want to help. I'd be glad to have you help anytime. Just let me know. We've got plenty of things to do. But to say that, we've got a roads committee that was excellent, but then they said, you know what, we only want to be asked to do things that we want to do. It's like, that's fine. So we'll call you up. We've used them where we can. And we've done really well by them.
Michael, a response?
Well, the hockey season in modern times is about 6 weeks. So to lose 4 weeks of it is a big deal. And again, anyone who's ever played hockey or flooded rinks would have known not to do that. The fact that it was a paid employee instead of a volunteer actually makes it worse.
So help us next time, Mike. We'll always use your help. Just let us know when you can. I'm good with that.
Thank you. Mary Wingfield, the next question will go to you first. Not everyone in the households have small children. How could events like the 4th of July and the winter holiday celebrations be more welcoming to and inclusive to all of its residents? And what new community events would you like to add?
Well, it's our 100th anniversary coming up next year. You only get one of those once every 100 years. So it's really important that we have the ability to do something fun and fantastic. That's on my radar. It's unfortunate another community nearby just had their 100th anniversary. I think 2 years ago, you didn't hear even a burp about it. So that is top shelf. Celebrating also involves celebrating each other in this time of COVID. And what we were able to do is get people to come together to say, hey, I can help my neighbor out. I can be that person to help. And the neighbor is saying, hey, you know what, it'd be great if I didn't know this person was available to come get my groceries for me. So that is a new opportunity that, it might sound like work, but people are actually thinking it's a great activity. 4th of July is a social event. We encourage people of all ages to come. And so that has been our signature event since 1953. I've been in charge of that since 2004. Before that, my parents were in charge of it for 12 years. Another opportunity, anybody wants to help, we're always willing, Mike, anyone who wants to step in and pitch in on that. It's a full-time job, but it's our signature event that makes us unique here in Birchwood. And I think it's something that will go on for years to come because of our participation.
Thank you. Michael, McKenzie?
Well, I've enjoyed the 4th of July parade while living here. I've brought my children down there every year. My children, when they were young, enjoyed the breakfast with Santa or whatever they call that event. But I don't remember much change in the last few years, so it might be time to revisit what the community actually wants. Again, get some community surveys out there and see what events the community would like to participate in. I mean, I could see us putting once or twice a summer, almost farmer market / small carnival together with food trucks or something like that at Ty Schmidt Park. We could do some new things. I mean, and I don't have any problem with the Santa thing or the 4th of July parade. They're both good events, but I think we have to modernize a little bit.
Thank you. Any further?
Yeah, let me just make it clear. The community club functions as a wholly separate entity from City Hall. And so anytime somebody says, hey, I would like to do a food truck or this party or that thing, doesn't need City Hall involvement. It's this community club. And so anyone can always volunteer to say, hey, we want to start up something new. There's no restriction on that. It's always available. So people just need to come together and say, let's do it. And as a coordinator for that, I'd be glad to get you started.
Any further? Okay, we'll go to the next question. The first to answer is Michael McKenzie. What do you think of the current arrangement the village has with the Dock Association? What, if anything, do you think should change? And do you think the village charges voters too much or too little?
Well, I think a few years ago, the dock associations each easement had their own association, and that was a bad idea. So bringing them under one umbrella association is a very good idea. A few years ago, they paid almost nothing for those slips, and it was really basically the city subsidizing a few long-term residents that held their spot for years. Now they rotate the spots, which is fair, and they are charged somewhat closer to a market rate. They're not charged a market rate, and the city isn't necessarily in the business of trying to make money off the easement, so I think that's okay. But they're still charged quite a bit less than the market rate, so maybe that needs a little bit revisiting. There's a waiting list for all the easements, so that tells me there's more demand than supply. And again, if we were charging a little bit more, that might ease the waiting list a little bit, and frankly, it would be more in line with market rates, and that's probably a good idea too. Again, as far as the non-motorized boats on the easements, the kayaks and such, we've increased that quite a bit. We charge less than any of the surrounding communities for that, and that's something that should be looked at too.
Thank you. Mary Wingfield.
So the Dock Association is a wholly owned, independent LLC. City doesn't have anything to do with what they charge. The city just says we have a fee for the Dock Association for boats that are put out. We take in $750 per boat. The Dock Association, as my understanding is, they charge about $1,300, $1,350, somewhere in that ballpark. That's their charge. Whatever they want to do with the upcharge is their business. We don't govern them. We don't have anything to say about it. We don't have any control over it. But here's what's interesting. I think that I don't like to see people waste their money. I would be glad to have the community help the Dock Association if they want to cut costs. If they became a committee under the city, they would save themselves $2,200 in insurance costs alone, because our insurance doesn't go up if it becomes a committee. And the city would actually be involved with the cost of putting out the docks. Right now, the docks are put out by the Dock Association, and the city residents get free use of it. I don't really think that's fair. I don't like to see them paying for something they don't have to. But if they're a private entity, that's part of the deal. If they're a community committee, then they can get their costs down even more. So I'm willing to listen to that because I think it needs to be affordable and reasonable, and it is something that my mother used to say was the benefit of living in Birchwood. Everyone has access to the lake, and that is huge. That makes us different than everyone else.
Anything further?
Yeah, I would say my understanding is that the fees for having a boat through that Dock Association is a little bit more than 50% of what the market rate is. So if we're only charging the Dock Associations $750 and they're basically undercharging by about 50%, the city could certainly raise that $750 to $1,000 or $1,250, and the Dock Association could get closer to market, and everyone would be better off.
I just can't support that, because we have people of all economic incomes who don't live on the lake, and this is the benefit that they love coming to Birchwood. People buy houses in Birchwood. Our houses sell in like 4 or 5 days because people are so happy to move to Birchwood. I'm not interested in raising the Dock Association rates. It's very reasonable. I want to keep it that way.
Thank you. Next question, if there is no more feedback, we'll start with Mary Wingfield. What is your vision for Birchwood moving forward? Could you describe the existing long-range strategic plan for Birchwood 2020 to 2040?
Well, actually, we just finished our comprehensive plan that takes in those things with regard to putting aside monies for long-term maintenance and the like. Just to give you an example, we have $90,000 in our sewer fund to take care of the maintenance that comes from replacing the infrastructure from time to time. So our infrastructure is in really good shape, and what people don't realize is most of the time when you're involved with city decisions, it's not the simple stuff that's on the surface. It's the stuff that how do we make our systems run efficiently and without major overhauls. So going forward, like I say, we've got the 100-year anniversary coming up. We've got our city hall. It definitely, desperately needs to be preserved. Other communities get wrestled in these things and wonder what they're going to do. Ours is a landmark. It's a French designed Art Deco building that is truly unique. It was in the French Architectural Magazine of 1932 when it opened. I can't remember what it was built for, something like $10,000. It was pittance. But we've got to take care of that. And that takes substantial long-term planning, but it is the people's house. We've had it used for Christmas parties, for Girl Scouts, for Boy Scouts, for weddings, for family reunions, for funerals. It's the people's house, and it's very important that we get to keep that in the future the way other communities don't have. Willarney doesn't have one, Delwood doesn't have one, Montemita doesn't have one. This is who we are.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie.
Yeah, I would say long term with the city. First of all, in the last couple, 3, 4, 5 years, the turnover of residents has been huge, and we're growing younger every year. We're having a lot of the longtime residents move on, and they're being replaced by young families. I'm not sure these young families, we've reached out to them properly to get their input. Surely they need to live here for at least a few months before they can comment on intelligently on what is they'd like and what they wouldn't like. But we have to reach out better for our young families. We have to plan for the future by some change. I mean, our housing stock is going to be basically static. This brand new subdivision notwithstanding, most of the building in Birchwood is going to be rebuilding houses that are bought and torn down and rebuilt. So planning for that is, it's not subdivision planning. It's just being a welcoming community and making sure that we, again, revisit our codes on a schedule so that everything's up to date and we don't run into problems with that.
Anything further?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we'll start with Michael McKenzie on the next. Why did you decide to run for office, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I decided to run for office. To be honest with you, the first chunk of time I lived here, I had 3 young children, and I'm a teacher by trade, and I coach 3 sports besides that, trying to basically afford the house that I live in. So there wasn't a lot of time for getting involved in the council. I did at one point a few years back try to get on the council when there was a midterm replacement situation. The last few years, the last 8 years, I've been the president of the Teacher Association in White Bear Lake, which already has about somewhere between 10 and 15 night and weekend meetings a month. So again, I just didn't feel I had the time to get involved in the council. Now I do have the time to get involved in the council, and I'd like to give back to Birchwood because I love it here. I have loved living here, and I think my leadership skills are in need.
Mary Wingfield.
So I'm going to take the question as, why am I running for office this time? There are things that need to be finished. Like I say, the radar is on our city hall. It needs to be taken care of. We've been taking care of our infrastructure. Things that we've done recently include, like I say, the path that we've just accomplished. We're improving the path system through Birchwood. That was on a survey about 3 years ago that people said they wanted more of. We've just put new pickleball courts in up at the tennis court. We're working on our water meter system so that we get that online with the 20th century. We're woefully behind on that. And we're putting a new generator in down at the Delwood lift station with COVID money, because it's so important that we not have any backups. And that's been without a backup emergency generator since it was built in the 60s. And so these are all things that clearly wish they would have been addressed a long time ago, but we're taking care of all the loose ends. And I find gratification in that we're solving problems as efficiently and economically as we've been able to. We're no longer building $42,000 paths to nowhere. We're no longer building catch basins at $10,000 a pop that don't catch. So there was a lot of problems with regard to how we were spending money before. Now we're making sure it's what we want. And we went to zero budgeting so that people say, this is what we want. How are we going to pay for it? And then it becomes justifiable, and it's worked out really well.
Thank you. And if there are no rebuttals, we'll go to some specific issues that people raised.
I'd like to say something on that, please.
All right.
Mary, I'm glad you mentioned the pickleball courts. I thought that was a much better idea than try to put a concrete slab on a blog. But the problem with how they were done is you replace tiles throughout the tennis court. Now, none of the tennis court lines are regulation any longer. It's too long, it's too wide, the service courts aren't the right size. And then between the two courts, there's a 6.5 inch by 3/4 inch trench that you can twist or break an ankle on. So perfect example of how volunteer work probably wasn't the right way to go.
Thank you.
So Mike, we've got 80 hours of volunteer work in putting that together. I put a lot of time into that. And in fact, I've got the tiles to fix that trench on my front porch. We need some help putting that in. I'd be glad to have you help do that because that's going to finish the trench. But let me tell you this, when we were out measuring the tennis court, for the last 12 years, the tennis court was actually 1 foot longer on one side than the other side. So if you were playing upstream, you had to hit the ball farther to keep it in, and downstream, it was a shorter court. We fixed that. So if you thought we had a regulation court to start with, we weren't even close. So you know what? That's the beauty of the unintended consequences. You fix something and you fix it right.
Thank you. And this seems like it will be the last question before we end. The first to go will be Mary Wingfield. How do you approach deer management? The village has had 2 deer hunts for bow hunters. So what is your opinion? Should they continue or stop?
So this has been a very emotional issue for people. We're going to be dealing with it again tomorrow night. The deer management, we held an open house on that, and people, by a ratio of about 50 to 2, were in support of deer hunt. That would not have been my personal preference, but you know what? I understand that people have some concerns about, very, very legitimate concerns about the deer ticks, and they don't want to see the animals overgrazing their properties. So we've done what we've been told is the right thing to do. It's not really successful though, because we just had a hunt in October and there are no deer around. And so they called 0 on 2 days. I think we have to keep looking at that. It's not a win-win situation no matter what you do. It's very emotional. I'm very sad for the people who want to see the animals not injured, not killed. But I understand that, you know, the DNR is suggesting the deer are overpopulated.
Thank you. Michael McKenzie.
Yeah, I would just say that I would say that I'd be concerned that the hunt isn't really accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish. Clearly, with Catherine Abbott so close to us, the deer can come over here at will. And they, as Mary just spoke of, when they want to disappear for a few days or weeks at a time, they do. So they roam the area from here to Catherine Abbott over into Grant. They kind of go where they want. And to have a hunt in our backyard and basically in our neighborhoods to try and take a half dozen deer out every now and then, I really just don't think that's going to solve the issue. I'm not necessarily strongly against it because I think deer management is a practice that the DNR uses and uses it all over the state. So it's that part of it's not particularly controversial. I do feel for people that are vegetarians or animal lovers that don't want to see hunting at all, but I'm not sure that's the answer either.
Any further? So then we will turn to your closing statements. We had a lot more questions that we couldn't get to. I wish we could have, but for your closing statement, Mary Wingfield, please begin.
Thank you. It's been a long night. My voice is wearing out, but I do definitely appreciate the league helping provide information to our voters so they know what's going on. I've been mayor for the past 10 years, 12 out of the last 14. I've enjoyed, actually it's 10 out of the last 12. I've enjoyed working with people, being friends with them, listening to their concerns. It's a very time-consuming job. It's also very important to know the history of who we are, where we've come from. I've lived in Birchwood all my life. I know my neighbors. And I like the fact that people can reach out and have a conversation and talk about what their concerns are. And I think we've been very proactive, reactive to that. And with that, I will close with the fact that this development is front and center, and it is front and center in my mind. And I know people are really concerned about it. And that is my charge going forward, is to make sure we do the right thing there. I actually think we can work with the developer and coming up with a plan that actually the city could purchase some of that property, so some of it is not developed fully. I think that might be a middle ground.
Michael McKenzie.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank the league for putting this on. This is very important that we get both Mary and I up in front of the community so they have something to judge us on. I believe the council needs leadership change, and I believe I'm up for that challenge. And again, I would welcome anyone with any concerns or questions on my positions to look at my website, McKenzieForBirchwoodMayor.com. And there's a connection link right there to email me directly if you have any questions that are of a more personal rather than general nature. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. I just have a couple of announcements before we end. We will put all of our forums on our YouTube channel, and you can go directly to YouTube to see them. You will also find links to them on our website, www.lwv-wbla.org. You can request an absentee ballot now on the Secretary of State's website, mnvotes.org. And I heard today that you should be requesting it soon if you are going to do absentee. If you need to register to vote or update your registration, you can do that online or when you go to vote at the polls. That ends our forum. Thank you, candidates, for speaking to voters about the issues and for coming forward to run in Birchwood. Thanks to our volunteers and our viewers for watching and your interest in becoming informed voters. Make your voice heard in the general election by voting November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.